A terrifying encounter on Stormy night. It was a dark and stormy night, and James, a weary traveler, found himself driving down a desolate road in the middle of nowhere. The rain poured relentlessly, creating an eerie symphony of water against metal. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of foreboding as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a chilling undertone. As James approached a sharp bend, his tired eyes strained to make out the road ahead. Just as he began to doubt his navigation, his headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. His foot instinctively moved to the brakes, causing the car to skid slightly on the wet pavement. A jolt of fear coursed through James as he took in the scene before him. The figure, a man of imposing stature, stood still with an unnatural stillness. He wore tattered clothes that clung to his thin frame, soaked from the relentless downpour. Raindrops slid off his pale skin, accentuating the hollowness in his eyes. In his hand, he held an axe, its sharp blade reflecting the dim light. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, James felt a sense of dread seeping into his bones. His mind raced, contemplating the sinister intentions of the man. Why was he standing in the middle of the road on such a treacherous night? Was he injured or seeking help? Or was he a harbinger of something far more sinister? Heart pounding, James quickly assessed his options. The narrow road offered no chance to pass the figure safely, and reversing seemed equally perilous in the rain-soaked darkness. He felt a knot of panic tighten in his chest as he realized he was trapped, the unsettling smile on the man's face haunting his thoughts. As James contemplated his next move, the figure vanished from his sight. Confusion mingled with his fear as he strained to see any trace of the man in his rearview mirror. Had he imagined the encounter? A sense of relief began to wash over him until, suddenly, the figure materialized at the end of the road, shrouded in shadows. The man's smile widened, revealing a row of yellowed, decaying teeth. With deliberate steps, he advanced towards James, the axe clutched tightly in his hand. The sound of his footsteps resonated ominously in the stillness of the night. Each step seemed to echo like a sinister heartbeat, causing James' pulse to quicken in response. Desperation took hold of James as he slammed his foot on the accelerator, his tires spinning in the mud before gripping the road. The car lurched forward, and he sped away, hoping to leave the horrifying presence behind. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror, his blood turned to ice in his veins. The figure was no longer at the end of the road. Instead, he was now seated in the back seat of James' car, his malevolent gaze fixed upon him. Terror surged through James as he struggled to maintain control of the vehicle. The figure's face, twisted with an unhinged intensity, glowed eerily in the reflection of the passing streetlights. A sickening realization dawned upon James: he was being relentlessly pursued by a deranged man wielding a bloodied axe. With trembling hands, he tried to formulate a plan, but his thoughts were clouded by panic and confusion. The figure in the backseat seemed to feed off James' fear, his presence suffocating. The sensation of the man's breath on his neck and the chilling scrape of the axe against the window intensified James' terror, driving him to the brink of madness. It was clear that the man would not rest until he had exacted his sinister intentions. James knew he had to find a way to escape this relentless nightmare, or else he would become just another victim of the man with the axe. As James drove frantically, the rain intensified, battering against the car's windows and roof. The deluge created a disorienting cacophony, making it difficult for James to concentrate on the road ahead. His pulse raced, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, as he tried to navigate through the blinding sheets of rain. In a desperate attempt to shake off his terrifying passenger, James swerved the car violently, careening from one side of the road to the other. But no matter how he maneuvered, the man remained steadfast in the back seat, his eyes gleaming with a sadistic delight. The figure seemed immune to the chaos of the erratic driving, his grip on the axe unyielding. With each sharp turn and sudden acceleration, the man's presence grew more menacing. He taunted James, whispering chilling words that cut through the noise of the storm like a razor blade. The car skidded off the road, crashing through underbrush and slamming into a tree. The impact jolted James, momentarily disorienting him. As he regained his senses, he glanced in the rearview mirror, hoping against hope that the man would have vanished. But to his horror, the man was still there, unaffected by the crash, his eyes fixed on James with an unholy determination. Realizing that the car was no longer an option, James knew he had to flee on foot. The rain-soaked forest loomed before him, a labyrinth of darkness and uncertainty. Fear and adrenaline propelled him forward, and he pushed open the door, stumbling out into the drenched wilderness. Rain pounded relentlessly, turning the ground into a treacherous mudslide beneath James' feet. With each step, he struggled to maintain his balance, but the fear of what lurked behind him pushed him to keep running. The dense forest swallowed his cries for help, leaving him alone in this twisted nightmare. Branches whipped at his face, leaving stinging welts, and thorny bushes clawed at his clothes. The wet foliage seemed to conspire against him, as if the very forest itself was an accomplice to his pursuer. But he couldn't afford to stop. Couldn't give the man with the axe the chance to catch up. As James sprinted through the darkness, his gasps for breath drowned in the symphony of rain and thunder. Panic gnawed at his every thought, but he forced himself to focus on finding safety. It was then that he stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, its windows shattered and door slightly ajar. Desperation fueled his final burst of energy. With trembling hands, James pushed open the creaking door and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind him. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the dilapidated interior, searching for anything that could be used as a barricade. Grabbing broken furniture and debris, he stacked them against the door, creating a feeble barrier against the impending danger. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sank to the floor, his back pressed against the flimsy blockade. The silence within the cabin was deafening, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the dilapidated roof. But it wasn't long before the man with the axe arrived, his heavy footsteps echoing ominously outside. The cabin seemed to quiver in response to his presence, as if the very walls trembled with fear. The man's furious cries pierced the night, his voice a haunting symphony of malice and madness. James braced himself, his heart pounding in his ears. He knew the barricade wouldn't hold for long, and the thought of what awaited him outside sent a chill down his spine. Yet, amidst the terror, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He refused to be just another victim. With trembling hands, he reached for a broken plank of wood, sharpening one end against a rusty nail. The makeshift weapon gave him a sliver of hope, a glimmer of defiance against the encroaching darkness. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the inevitable confrontation that awaited. And so, within the claustrophobic confines of the cabin, James vowed to confront the horrors that surrounded him, praying that the dawn would bring salvation or, at the very least, an end to this chilling nightmare.